To get things started, hello. Welcome to Utah Clean Energy's second Lunch and Learn of the year. My name is Brandy Smith. I'm the Communications Director for Utah Clean Energy, and I'm joined by my colleague, Josh Kraft. He's our Director of Government and Public Relations. He has officially survived the 2026 legislative session, thankfully, as have we all. And so we're excited to give you a quick rundown of everything that went down, the highs and the lows of this year's session. So we have a lot to cover and a lot to go through. So I'll quickly go over some housekeeping and then hand things over to Josh. As a point, we are recording today's session and it will be available on YouTube. So just as a note, everybody, we do have the record button going. We are going to hold questions, live questions for the end of the webinar. We always leave plenty of time for questions, but if you could post those questions in the chat as they come to you, don't be shy. I'll be going over those and we'll get through them towards the end of the session. So please feel free to type into that chat as much as you like. With that, I think we're going to dive right in and I'll ask Josh to get us rolling.
Thanks, Brandy, and thanks everyone for joining today. The 2026 Utah legislative session, as Brandy noted, is indeed almost officially over. We know that more than 500 bills have passed, and the governor I would say, is still reviewing. He has until the end of the day today to review a few more bills, but has signed most of the bills or allowed them to become bill law without his signature. And so this is our chance to talk about what happened this session in the energy front, in the air quality, in the transportation front. And I'll just say that and in general, it was a very interesting one, a little bit calmer, I'd say, in particular in energy than last session. Before I go into bills and how to summarize what happened this year, and to take your questions, I wanted to say that we really couldn't do this important work without you, for a clean, affordable, and healthy energy future. It's the partnerships, it's the outreach that you do, and the support for our team that really allow us to do this work. And we're so grateful for you spending your time with me today, but also just all the work that you do with Utah Clean Energy. On that front, I did want to share two important non-legislative announcements. Most of you have seen that we are going through an important transition. We are bringing on a new CEO, Sarah Baldwin, who starts work next week, and we're super excited. She brings a ton of leadership and energy policy expertise and is a former Utah Clean Energy staffer and alum, and so she's coming back. And we're looking forward to having her join and to introducing her to all of you as she gets her feet off the ground. We, of course, with a new CEO, we have another important transition where Sarah Wright, after an amazing 25 years, will be stepping down at the beginning of May. And I know that she won't be a stranger, but we're honoring her legacy. And importantly, we have one way we're doing that is our 25th anniversary celebration on April 23rd at the University of Utah. And if you'd like to join, and if you're in town, there are still tickets available. Would love to see you there. With that, looking back at the session, I'll just give an overview of what we're going to talk about today. That I want to give a big picture look at where we were at in terms of the energy environmental policy landscape in the state of Utah before the session, talk about some of the priorities that we had going in, give the high level, 50,000 foot overview of the good and the bad from what we saw this year, talk about new laws and bills that you should know about. And that's where I'm going to spend the majority of the time. And then, as Brandy mentioned, leave time for your questions at the end. So looking back and where we started, I think that last year, 2025, was a super busy year for energy and electricity policy. It was one of the busiest that I experienced. And I think that notes the importance of energy at the state level to our state's future, and the interest in and concerns about some of where both national and local policy was headed. But it was ultimately a session where we saw a lot of problematic bills that would have hindered our ability to harness our solar and energy efficiency resources in this session. And this session was a lot calmer. I will note in the end, but going in, it was a little bit unclear as to what the plans were from Governor Cox and state legislative leadership were. The governor is still clearly making energy a big priority with Operation Gigawatt to expand energy generation and capacity, but there were fewer public statements from he and from Speaker Mike Schultz and Senate President Stuart Adams about what their priorities were going to be. The governor, for instance, didn't include anything in his budget proposal about energy. So we had some unknowns. There were some things that were clear, that there was going to be discussions and emphasis on new nuclear energy and nuclear safety. And in the background, there's still clearly a lot of concern with the future of PacifiCorp and Rocky Mountain Power. And after some proposals to some significant rate increases last year. So that was looking at energy, big picture, what we saw. I would say that the other important thing to note on the energy front is that there has been a real shift at the national level within the Trump administration this year away from focus on zero emissions, wind, solar, and storage, and to other places. We know that the administration has over the last year really worked to block a lot of new permitting for solar and wind, very different than in the Biden administration, as well as passing the HR1, which included a rollback or phase down of a lot of clean energy tax credits. So that's a very different environment than we saw, and something that certainly is starting to trickle down at the state level. And then finally, I think there was a lack of clear focus and clear goals from the legislature on air quality and environmental policy, which led to, again, some of this uncertainty. We heard from Speaker Mike Schultz an interest in lowering the state gas tax. There were ongoing, and I think continue to be ongoing, and important discussions about the Great Salt Lake and the future of how we're going to protect it. And then in the background, interest and excitement around the 2044 Winter and Paralympic Games. So all those things, I think, sort of like led to where we were, the environment where we started. With that, our priorities have remained consistent, but it's worth going through them. We want to make sure that as the governor and the state are seeking to build out and eventually double our electricity generating capacity, that solar, geothermal, and energy storage are an essential part of that strategy. They are all Utah-based resources. They are affordable, deployable today. And so that's always going to be an emphasis of ours. We are focused on increasing energy efficiency and making that more accessible and available to Utah residents and small businesses. And so we are exploring a new financing strategy to support that. And I'll get into the specific bills in a minute. We want to modernize our electricity grid. That would includes making better use of our existing grid assets, as well as expanding our transmission system and using exciting new distributed technologies, including our new plug-in solar resource. Talk a little more about that later. And then finally, bringing diverse expertise on major energy bills is always going to be a priority of ours, and something that I'm always really proud of what we bring. We work very closely with partners in the clean energy industry through our Clean Energy Business Coalition, large energy users, many communities throughout the state. And we don't always know what the focus is going to be, but having a network of experts who understand energy, understand the risks of not embracing clean energy is going to be super a priority of ours. And that allows us to inform whatever bills are thrown at us during the session. Okay. Here is the good, the bad, and the unknowns, or my too long didn't read version of what happened during the 2026 legislative session. So before I get into the details of all the bills, I think I did mention it was, I think, a much better session on the respect to renewable energy and energy efficiency in terms of state policy. There were no major bills that sought to block or undermine those that passed. and mostly that which is super positive and a big step forward in its own right. And I also want to give a big shout out to the executive agencies under Governor Cox for being proactive on bills, being helpful, and taking input from external stakeholders. There's a lot of expertise within our state environmental and energy agencies, and they have more time and I think more perspective to share. And it was really helpful. They didn't always do what I wanted, but the door was open. They were able to take input, and I think that that's a good sign moving forward. We also passed some new legislation that it's going to be really helpful for geothermal development for electricity within the state. I'll get into what those bills are, but that's a good sign for building out this clean, zero emissions, dispatchable homegrown energy resource. And then finally, the legislature took some steps outside of our work. I think sort of a somewhat surprising moves to purchase the assets around U.S. magnesium, which has been a long time problem for air quality and with respect to the Great Salt Lake. That was a kind of early move, and I want to give them credit for taking that effort. The bad, I would say that if we're looking at the glass half full, the other side of that is I think there was not enough proactive work on clean energy, energy efficiency, and upgrading our electricity grid. We could be doing so much more to build out and harness the zero emissions green resources we have. And I think some of the volatility in the energy landscape that we're seeing globally today is just another reminder that the more we're able to build out our electricity grid, harness what we have here, reduce energy bills, meet our needs at home, we're going to be safer as well as offer our residents a cleaner, healthier environment. There wasn't, I think, enough emphasis, I think, on air quality and within our transportation and energy policy. There was particularly a bill, SB 234, which I'll mention towards the end, would have put some restrictions on new state regulations that could help meet our own needs for environmental health. And then finally, I just have to say, like, it's kind of true in every session, but there was a lot of time wasted on unimportant bills. And I think that's just a sign that, when there's only 7 weeks, we need to be very careful about the time that we're spending and the effort we're making, because agencies, staff, legislative attorneys have to spend a lot of time on bills, and there were a number that were not very productive uses of time. Finally, I think I just want to note there are some unknowns that that is going to be the impact, both practically and long term, over some of the new state regulatory authority over nuclear energy and nuclear safety that's coming here, whether we're going to have a new nuclear industry, what that will look like, whether it's our capacity to regulate that. That's, I think, an unknown, but it's something we're stepping into. And then there was a piece of legislation, HB 514, that takes another attempt to find a purchaser for the Intermountain Power Plant coal plants that are currently not fully operating, and we'll see how that will play into the future of our energy mix. All right, so let's dig into the bills. What passed, what didn't pass, and some notes about how they work. So the first bill was a priority of ours that was to fund a study of on-bill energy efficiency improvements for residents, small business utility customers. Everyone here knows that energy efficiency is a huge priority of ours. It's our first and cheapest energy resource, and it's especially important at a time of rising electricity bills. I will note that, but upfront costs, out-of-pocket costs, are a barrier for a lot of Utahns in terms of putting efficiency measures in homes, in small businesses, to get those energy savings. And this is particularly true for lower and moderate income residents. So we worked with Representative Clint Okerlund, who's a Republican in Salt Lake County, to try to first do a piece of legislation. And when that didn't have a clear path forward, we chose to work on a request for appropriation, meaning a budgetary request to fund a $60,000 study. And I'm proud of the work that we did. We had a great presentation before an appropriations committee about this effort. Representative Okerlund did a ton of work to see if we could get something funded, given how important this voluntary energy efficiency repayment tool can be. But it was a really challenging funding year. And so ultimately, despite that work, we didn't get this bill passed this particular year. So we're going to pursue some other avenues to see if we can either move on bill repayment or another like or similar energy efficiency financing mechanism moving forward. So we'll look there, but didn't get that this year. I want to thank Max Becker and our team for doing a ton of work for laying the groundwork here, our colleagues at Stewardship Utah, and we're not done with this, but it didn't go over the line this year. That wasn't the only energy efficiency bill that was in front of us. We did some work on two other bills that we got some really important amendments and some changes to. And I think one of the really important values of our team and the work that we do at the session, I think, is illustrated here. The first is HB 65, which is the Construction Code Amendments Bill by Representative Tom Peterson. This was a massive bill that deals with updating the energy fire in some electrical code for residential buildings. And it's a big bill. The problem was with a second substitute version of the bill, a second change that was thrown in after the bill passed the House and was changed in the Senate. It would have removed and gotten rid of some of the air sealing and duct testing requirements that for new residential buildings, new homes. And this is an important part of achieving energy efficiency and saving customers money in our homes. Those requirements have been part of our residential building code since 2006. And if you're getting rid of those, there's a chance you're going to be building much less efficiently and for decades to come. So importantly, Kevin Emerson, our building energy efficiency program director, rallied a lot of colleagues, building science professionals, home energy operators to point out just how important those air sealing and duct testing requirements are as part of the code. And thankfully, we're able to get the ear of the sponsor, Representative Tom Peterson, to restore those changes as part of the building code. And they were included in the fourth version of the bill, the fourth substitute, which was ultimately passed in the Senate and got through. So kudos to Kevin, kudos to air sealing and duct testing requirements. Super, super important to keep. So a win there. The other big energy efficiency bill that we spent a lot of time on was HB 549, Energy Efficiency Rebate Amendments by Representative David Schallenberger. As most of you know, our electric and gas utilities run energy efficiency programs that come out of our rates. And they're a way, because of energy efficiency is an energy resource, can meet our resource needs oftentimes more cheaply than supply. Those programs are paid for electricity bills and are regulated by the Public Service Commission and have a lot of oversight. I think there was some misunderstanding and misinformation about how the utilities get to operate these programs with their partners, how much oversight there was. And so the original version of this bill, we thought, had some unwise changes and would have required some duplicative reporting to the legislature that doesn't really have the expertise or the time to be working in this area. So we worked hard with the sponsor, Representative Schallenberger, to put together change the bill to change how the reporting for the efficiency programs would be required, giving the legislature a little more insight in how the programs work, the benefits they have, how much they're delivering for customers every year, while at the same time preserving and not recreating the wheel in terms of how the programs work. So that was super positive, super, not maybe the most exciting of bills during the session, but really important one. And I want to give thanks to Representative Schallenberger, who does some work in this area for listening to our concerns and making some changes to that bill. And it has been signed and finalized. All right. Moving on to energy, and particularly renewable energy bills that we followed and we tracked. The first one I want to note is a bill that has a pretty anodyne sounding name, HB 238, third substitute by Representative Carl Albrecht, Utility Generation and Transmission Planning. The underlying bill here is a good idea and a really good bill that we supported. It would give the Utah Public Service Commission, which oversees how our utilities operate and a lot of aspects of our grid, tries to oversee rates for Utah customers, oversight authority about how our utilities are getting involved in regional electricity markets. That is to say, how they're potentially a day ahead market to trade generation resources, and then or potentially over the long term, a regional transmission organization that would share more of our resources throughout the Western grid. That's all good. We are fully supportive of that. It makes sense to have our commission at the table negotiating with other states, having the information it needs. And I think there was a lot of consensus achieved there. However, we had a little bit of a scare during the second substitute. Bill was passed out of the House, one body in the Senate, but the second substitute version would have made changes at the very 11th hour to the Community Renewable Energy Program, requiring that program, which is 19 Utah communities have been working hard over the last 5+ years with Rocky Mountain Power to negotiate. It would have required it to change the rules in the program in a way that would have basically blocked it just before it was going to be approved by the Public Service Commission. There was a kind of mad dash scramble before the bill got to hearing in the Senate to make those changes, to see if the sponsor would allow for a substitute that would preserve the program. In this case, allowing it to remain an opt-out program for residents rather than an opt-in program as he preferred. In effect, ultimately, clean energy companies, Salt Lake City, Park City, Summit County, Ogden, and Utah Clean Energy, Stewardship Utah, we all kind of rallied and pushed hard, and thankfully the sponsor acceded to his problematic amendments and allowed a different version to move forward. So I'm really pleased about that. That was a major win, and more excitingly and importantly, the Public Service Commission has approved the rules for the Community Renewable Energy Program. Shout out to the Utah Renewable Communities Agency for all their hard work. And that program will look out for the rollout of that program if you're in one of those 19 communities served by Rocky Mountain Power in the next few weeks. You never know what's going to happen. There were some notable solar bills that affecting primarily utility scale solar, big solar. Although one of these bills does impact residents and rooftop solar, residential solar. The first two are sort of companion bills dealing with solar siting and decommissioning. Those are HB 16 solar power plant amendments by Representative Colin Jack, and HB 412 energy planning and development amendments by Representative Doug Owens. HB 16 was a refile from last year. That bill originally was pretty problematic. It would have blocked a lot of new utility scale solar larger than 1 megawatt if it was near agricultural land. And in the end, the sponsor, Representative Jack, was willing to make some changes. The primary impacts of that, the HB 16, which did cross the finish line this year, are going to be to require solar developers to have a decommissioning plan in place when they get a permit from a county or a local jurisdiction, which is pretty much best practice anyway. And it also pares back some incentives if those state incentives, not federal incentives, if they're on certain agricultural and farmland. So that's been the major impact of HB 16. HB 412, which pairs with HB 16 in the way that they wrote it up, requires that solar and wind projects over 1 megawatt have to consult with the Division of Wildlife Resources as part of that permitting process to make sure there are not any detrimental or ways to mitigate impacts to wildlife from large-scale solar and wind operations that happen within the state. And I think the industry was more or less fine with this bill, thinks this is a good approach, and it doesn't give DWR any new powers. It just make sure there's a consultation process, which I think is appropriate and helpful. allows us to cooperate with agencies as we're building new utility scale solar and wind. All to the good. The other bill here affecting solar, HB 323, deals with solar panel disposal. That is to say, the end of life when panels in 20 or 30 plus years, when solar comes to the end of life. And Representative Colin Jack had come up with a bill in its original form would have been problematic. It had some punitive fees and some confusing fee structure for at the installation phase or development phase of new solar projects, with the idea that those would help to, at the end of the life, address, uh, you know, potentially solar panels inadvertently ending up in landfills, and to incentivize recycling. The reality is that we are, and again, Utah Clean Energy, we are supportive of recycling solar panels, diverting solar panels from landfills, but I think this made a mountain out of a molehill. We are just now seeing our first, across the country, the first generation of solar, utility scale solar, come offline. And our first solar facility, major utility scale facility, was built around 2016, so it has a lot of useful life left. The and So the original version of the bill, I think, was not, was premature. But I want to give shout out to Representative Jack and also to Tim Davis, of the head of the Department of Environmental Quality and the Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control, for sitting down and forging a compromise that would move to a study process. So we're going to study how to make sure that solar panels don't end up in landfills, and we can stand up a solar panel recycling industry, something that's growing and throughout the country, something that I think there should be bipartisan consensus about supporting. So and there's a 2-year fee study. It will include, not only on utility scale arrangements, but I think there's around, depending upon size, about a $10 fee for smaller rooftop arrangements. It depends on the size of those systems, just for 2 years. It's a fairly nominal fee, but one that we want to make good use of. If you have questions, if you own solar and want to know a little bit more about this, the fee would be just on new installations, but I'm happy to make sure that we're getting your input as part, and I think having some good input and part of the study process will be good. That's the scene on solar. I wanted to note the bills that were worked on with respect to geothermal energy. Geothermal, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think you've seen, it's a hot topic. Hot rocks are hot. The state, I think, it's been a bright spot in our view for state energy policy. This, even though the first cost of both traditional and enhanced geothermal systems are sometimes pretty high, those costs have a promising path to come down, and this is a resource that can complement solar, wind, storage as a dispatchable resource that we're building here in Utah. So the first bill that is notable was SB 21, geothermal amendments by Senator Mike McKell. Like oil and gas, geothermal operations require drilling, and this bill seeks to provide clarity about the ownership of the land and what's underground when we're developing new large-scale geothermal for electricity purposes. And I'm not someone who deals a ton with surface and mineral and water rights in our work, but the essence of the bill is that it will allow the owner of a surface right to develop a geothermal resource to also own the mineral right and the mineral estate underground, unless that resource was previously been conveyed to someone else. So you're not going to disrupt any existing ownership structures, but you're going to clarify that surface right goes with the underground right. It also clarifies the role that the Division of Water Resources has in regulating water and fluid used for geothermal development, and gives them some appropriate oversight authority there. I know DWR worked really hard on this. As of this morning, this bill had not been signed, so I would expect the governor will sign this bill, but still waiting for him to etch this one. This was one of the few that's not yet finished in the energy space. The other bill on the geothermal front, HB 401, geothermal study amendments, that bill would change a ton. Representative Christine Watkins, of Republican from Price, was the leader there, and it was the end. In the end, what it is that it directs the Utah State University to fund and assess and do a study of the environmental and geological impacts of geothermal development, including geothermal development that can happen near existing coal plants, which may or may not retire in the near future. And so it's good to assess where that resource is and where it can go. But get it, it's more of an environmental take on understanding where the impacts of geothermal, and I think will be helpful to see. I have two more slides before your questions about some of the bills that we're following. I created a catch-all category here for big energy infrastructure legislation that's worth watching. The first one that was a big bill that came out towards the end of the session, HB 514, Utah Energy Council Amendments by Representative Neil Walter and Senator Ann Milner. The 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 bill does in the main two things. The last year, the Utah legislature created a new body, which we're supportive of, that will help with energy planning and development. It also is charged with the responsibilities for attempting to find a new purchaser for the IPP coal plants, the Utah Energy Council. It's been a 5-member body. It just got off the ground. And it has had 5 members led by the Office of Energy Development. The bill makes 2 changes and gives some new responsibilities to the Energy Council. The first is that it adds 2 new members to be chosen by the leaders in the legislature. So it would move from 5 to 7 members. One of those people would have expertise in economic development, and I expect will be the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, GOYO, and then another person with sort of utility expertise to be determined later. But it also changes that council so that it's co-chaired with a co-chair to be named by the legislature. So the legislature and the governor would kind of share responsibilities for directing the Energy Council moving forward. The other piece of this was that the bill creates a new energy infrastructure services district that would have give the count, which would be co-chaired by the council itself, that would seek to find ways to find a buyer and purchaser for those IPP coal plants, as you can see in the photo here. It gives that the energy services district would have some new bonding authority and ability to levy a privilege tax in hopes of locating and from the bill of locating a purchaser and an operator of those plants, which are no longer delivering power to the Los Angeles, where they've been going for many decades. I'm skeptical that this is going to work, that it's actually going to help facilitate anyone wanting to purchase these assets, given some of the existing costs and their scale. But that's sort of on the table, and the sort of next iteration of the legislature trying to keep the IPP coal plants alive, so that we'll be looking and watching out for the Energy Infrastructure Services District, but it doesn't have any authority beyond the area where the coal plants would operate. So it's not across the state. It's just in that particular region with a particular set of power. Additionally, there was a bill, HB 545, which creates a new energy infrastructure development fund. Which is basically a revolving loan fund that would support potentially some new nuclear infrastructure and transmission infrastructure in the future. $5 million isn't a lot of money in the energy infrastructure world, but a revolving loan fund could open up some avenues to do potentially some things with respect to nuclear energy or transmission in the future. And the Office of Energy Development, our state energy office, will operate that. Okay, here is the catch-all for everything else that happened that wasn't, and I'm going to try to go through these relatively quickly, and I'm happy to answer some questions about each. I mentioned that there was a lot of work and a lot of interest in new nuclear development in the state. Most of you have probably seen that we've had some test reactors from a company called Valar that have come near the San Rafael Energy Center in Emery County, and the governor has made some announcements about some future nuclear manufacturing. This bill, HB 78, first substitute nuclear energy amendments, would create a new state nuclear regulatory office, which would lives in the Department of Environmental Quality, seeking to gain, with I think the intention to oversee new um, development, potentially licensing of new nuclear power reactors and the certain types of nuclear waste, different lower levels of nuclear waste that would come into the state, and have the Department of Environmental Quality work on that. And I think it will fund two staffers to staff that agency. The other piece is it seeks to have Utah come into on a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission about new reactor designs and nuclear development in the hopes of bringing more of that to Utah. That's a big responsibility. That's a big change, and one that I think we should not enter. We should not enter into lightly. And I think we're going to be watching what that might mean. Our focus today at Utah Clean Energy is primarily at watchdogging and looking at how nuclear power our utilities may purchase or not purchase given the costs of new nuclear facilities. But I know that a lot of our partners are following this closely, and it's going to be something to watch if we're going to get more capacity to try to bring new nuclear reactor designs. Do we have the capacity to do that? Do we have the knowledge and expertise? It's mostly lived at the federal government for historically, and so something we want to watch out for. SB 234 rulemaking amendments, that was a bad bill. One that I'll note that is not yet been signed. And we actually asked with some dozens of other environmental and public health groups for the governor to veto. But it's a bill, and I'm sorry, Brandy, it says Brandy, it's Senator Brady Brammer, that it seeks to restrict our state agencies from issuing new environmental and public health rules that may be stricter than federal rules. In our view, that's not necessary and not helpful. We should be able to meet our own needs and issue rules with whether it's respect to bromine or methane or radiation that would impact us. There were some changes in this bill that may reduce the worst of its impacts. So it may not be quite as bad as I'm presenting it here, but it's not a good bill, and one that is not the kind of signal we want to be sending with respect to regulating and creating rules and standards that meet our own needs. The other bill, and in terms of the air quality front that we spent some time with was HB 263 by Representative Tyler Clancy, heavy duty trucking amendments. That bill would have placed a fee on heavy duty trucks older than 2009 of about $175 per year, with the goal of incentivizing fleet operators here to operate newer, cleaner vehicles. That sector tends to have the most polluting vehicles per mile, and so this was an attempt to reduce those emissions from that sector. It ultimately passed the House, but after some hard work by Representative Clancy and by some of our colleagues at Stewardship Utah, but didn't make it over the finish line. And the Senate didn't have the vote. So that'd be something that we hope that we can go back and look at that next year to see how we can help that sector. Two transportation bills, of note, HB 481, transportation modifications by Representative Keith Christopherson, who is the House Transportation Chair, does a ton of things on transportation. Pretty broad bill. One thing we didn't like about it was that it will raise fixed fees on electric vehicles to $280 next year. So it's been a long time battle that we've been engaged in. This was kind of a surprise. The current fee is $180 per year, so it goes up $100 next year. there is an alternative for customers to participate in a road usage charge program where you would pay per mile of operation. And if you are not enrolled and you're interested, this is a good time to do it before your annual renewal. And we're going to remind the Utah Department of Transportation, which runs the rec program, to be getting out good notifications. But if you have an EV, full EV, your fixed fees will go up if you don't participate in that program next year, according to the bill. And then finally, there was a lot of excitement around a bill about the fuel tax, the state gas tax. That was a big priority of House leadership, HB 575. That bill went through a number of iterations, behind the scenes drama, before it ended up being basically a 6-month holiday for and reduction in the state gas tax of about 15%, which will last from the summer and into the end of the year before going back up to its previous level. And so that, but something that was certainly in the background, and particularly as we've seen historic increases in gas prices over the past few weeks, I'm doubting will make much of a difference to most customers, but it is something that the legislature spent a fair amount of time on, and will have an impact on our road budget and our transportation budget, given the reduction in the gas tax for that time. So but a big bill, spent a lot of time. And I'm now, Brandy, and everyone, going to end. That change? A reminder that you can look at all the bills we've been tracking on our website and our legislative tracker. But I want to pause and answer your questions.
Nicely done, Josh. Thank you so much. So Tom has a really good question going back to the geothermal bill from a few minutes ago. He's wondering if that bill will include commercial ground source geothermal, heat pump drilling, such as, cooling a data center. Can you speak to that a little bit?
The I don't think that there is a size level that's included in SB 21. So the bill is primarily about geothermal that would be used for large scale electricity development. And so I don't think it would get in the way of that, Tom. But I don't know how it would change current rules with, for a data center. But if it's for heating and cooling, or a district heating or cooling system, I don't think that the impacts are there. It's primarily for electricity generation specifically.
Hmm.
I can
And
follow up on
then
that one. So.
And then on nuclear, Dale was curious if there's been any new developments on how to handle nuclear waste, and if there's any proposals from Utah on just kind of how to deal with that challenge.
Um, I don't think that, that's been part of the public discussion. Um, and I don't know of any new specific proposals. That's not an area that we did a ton of work in, to bring new classes of nuclear waste here, or any technological developments that would really, change the use of, or storage and recycling of nuclear waste at least within the state of Utah. The reactors that folks are putting a lot of bets on are smaller than traditional reactors, but they're very new. They're very, very early stage. So I think the jury is yet to be out on whether a 1 megawatt or smaller nuclear facility, what the profile is, and if those are going to be commercially viable.
Hmm. Great, thank you. I think that was it for the posted questions, but I'll open things up. If there's any other questions, feel free to get those in the chat. While we're waiting on any final, I'll just put one more final plug that there's 2 links in there. If you do want to RSVP for the upcoming Powering Forward event, Utah Clean Energy's 25-year anniversary. That's April 23rd, and there's another link in the chat to get your tickets. And then, another question. Dennis was curious about Valor the company you mentioned earlier, is it based the microreactor in Orangeville? I don't know if you have any final comments on that, Josh. Or
I mean, the um, I don't know the status of those. I know that they were delivered here on military planes and moved to to start as part of the nuclear energy lab that they have at the San Rafael Energy Center. So the pieces of those micro reactors were built and delivered. I don't. It's a good question, Dennis. I don't yet know the status of whether those are operating. Those are test reactors, so they're not going to be on the utility, customer. They're not being delivered to customers outside of that facility. They're not, they're just a test phase at this point. A lot of excitement by some in some corners there. I know that there are a number of startups in this field that, and Valar is just one, I think, of about a dozen that are working in this area. So the yet to be seen.
yeah, excellent. Well, if there's no other questions, I think we can end this. I'll thank Josh again for not just today, but for all of your incredible work on our behalf at the state capitol and throughout the year, advancing clean energy policy. And one other thanks just to everybody who made time today to join us at our second virtual lunch and learn. Everybody that participates in the session, writes letters to the editor, contacts your legislator. This is a community effort. And we're very, very grateful for all of you. So with that, have a great day and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.